So welcome everybody to our panel on the good, the bad, and the ugly of going global during a pandemic, beer edition. So we're really excited to be here today to talk about the highs and lows of exporting your product as you're going into new markets during a pandemic. So we are here today, and I always think that it's best to let the panelists introduce themselves because they know their business and their companies and what they do way better than me. So we'll start with Matt. Matt, did you want to introduce your company, what you're doing, how long you've been around?
Sure, yeah. So my name is Matt Gates, co-owner and sales director for the Dandy Brewing Company. We've been in business for just over 6 years now, going on 6.5, I guess. In the Alberta market, we've been selling outside of Alberta for the last 2 years, and just kind of spotty in BC, I guess Saskatchewan, Manitoba, New Brunswick a little bit, and just more recently made a shipment down to Australia, and so that's kind of started our journey overseas and shipping our product overseas. So that's kind of where we're at for right now.
Fantastic, thank you. Ted, how about you?
Sure. So I'm the CEO and founder of Partake Brewing, and we're definitely a craft beer, but our specialty is making non-alcoholic craft beer. So kind of a different take on the craft beer market with us. We've been around since 2017. We launched our non-alcoholic beer brand on Kickstarter. Probably the first beer company ever to have an online-only presence from the get-go. But we've had some great growth over the last few years. We are selling across Canada in grocery and liquor channels, and then also in the US. So some export experience there, and we just got our first order for Bermuda as well. So my team is very excited about doing some field work down there later on.
Oh, fantastic! Congratulations.
Thank
So
you.
I think we'll start off with the good, right? Go on from there. It would be nice if you could just explain an experience or international business or export experience or partnership that's been really great. So whether it's just been on your journey to exporting or while you're actually physically exporting, whether it's trade commissioner service, EDC, any distributor, anything like that, and how it's helped you during the pandemic. So I guess we'll start with Ted.
Yeah, we've had, great help from many of the people, you mentioned, Shona. We have investment from Export Development Canada, from their private equity side of their business. We use their receivables insurance, which, helps us with our bank and our credit facility. That's one, just one example. The Trade Commissioner Service, we've been on multiple international missions, largely to the US, and have become members at a food accelerator in Chicago called the Hatchery, and another one in Boston called Branch Foods. And as we're just about to launch in some of those markets, we kind of have our own local networks. So I think there's a lot of great opportunities from some of those Canadian agencies that can support international trade. So I've had a very positive experience with many of them, and I think it's really incumbent on companies that want to do international business to seek out that help.
Perfect, thank you. I agree too, and I know that sometimes it can seem a little overwhelming. Maybe there's so many different resources available to you, and you're trying to figure out what's going to be the best for you and the best partnership or relationship really as you're going into these new markets. So it's glad that they've all been working out for you well. Perfect. Yeah. So Matt, how about you?
Yeah, so we are relatively new to the whole export game, and haven't done a ton outside of our country, but just graduating the Trade Accelerator program recently, I've started developing a lot of relationships, networking as much as we can network in this environment right now, but just really kind of planting the seed in relationship building in some of the organizations that both of you mentioned, like with the Trade Commissioner, and using them as a resource. We've been doing a lot of market research right now, especially into the United States. for looking into avenues to kind of promote our brand and sell our product down there, and just the amount of again, relationships and networking that we've come across has been very, very positive, and on both sides of the border. So that's a huge takeaway for us. People that we've connected with, the advice that we've had, and I think as soon as you start talking about beer, it's kind of a social lubricant, and it kind of opens people up a little bit more, and just really positive conversations. So I say the planting the seeds in what I hope are longer term relationships in kind of this whole project of ours was definitely been a win so far.
Thanks. Yeah. And it's really interesting too, because for instance, Ted, with Partake, you guys were cohort number 1, our first cohort of the Trade Accelerator program. Then Matt, you guys were cohort number 9. So yeah, it's really cool to see just new graduates, and then people that have been like, Ted, you guys are the OG cohort. So you guys started us off, and it's kind of shifted, and it's cool to see how companies are growing and building those relationships. So I think that it does take, it takes time, right? It takes time to find the ones that work best for you, and it takes time to build these relationships. But I will say that I think that during COVID, it's actually been an opportunity to build stronger relationships with our partners and distributors during all of this. I think not that anyone has more time per se on their hands, but I think people are looking more for that connection.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more.
So I guess we'll move on to the bad now. So what has been a roadblock for you in your export journey to new markets? So has it been time zones, languages, culture, maybe a partnership that hasn't been fantastic? And how has this affected you during COVID? So has it pivoted you at all during this? Has it affected you at all during this pandemic? Or was this something that happened before that you were lucky enough to be able to move on from before the pandemic? So I guess we'll start with Ted.
Sure. So, the pandemic has effects on all businesses, whether, good or bad. I don't think any business is the same as it was before. I think for us in the beer industry, we're largely on the positive side of that because most of our sales channels have remained open. Demand for the products have been relatively strong. So, I count ourselves lucky as an industry. In terms of the challenges, though, like we had some very high growth, trajectories for our U.S. business this calendar year, and some of that stuff is going to happen, but it's really 6 months pushed back, and there was obviously some hesitancy as we were negotiating with distributors across the country, and they got past the first wave and they got into summer, and people's mindset was, okay, things are turning the corner, and then they had the second wave, and you're at kind of the finish line with negotiations on contracts, and those things can just evaporate very quickly depending on the COVID situation. So I think that's one of the challenges certainly during this period. The other is, I think this is a huge learning for us and any other business looking to do business in the US in particular, and probably translates to other markets as well, but maybe more so for the US, where they really want to see US results in order to validate your product as something that will sell for them. And it's very hard to do that. It's one of those chicken and the egg scenarios where, well, if no one gives me a shot, how am I supposed to prove it? Same thing happens in Canadian retail as you expand as well, right? You need to work up from kind of the minor leagues, if you will, a few independent stores, small chains, regional chains, national chains. It kind of works that way. And in the States, it's no different. They generally will discount Canadian business substantially. So you really need to find people that are maybe a little bit more open to innovation, new products, Canadian products, maybe even to get you kind of like that audition. And if you're successful in the audition, then it opens up a whole new ball game for you. But that's I think the biggest lesson learned, and the biggest challenge in going international is really being able to convince buyers and partners that your product will work in their market.
Yeah, I agreed. And we were talking about this in even our cohort a couple of weeks ago. It's just how do your value propositions change? How do your customers change? And how do you find that right market fit for you and your product? Being a non-alcoholic beer, did you find it easier or harder?
I think it was easier for us. And I think the reason was that we had a very compelling value proposition without a lot of noise. I think it's harder for an alcoholic craft brewer to do that, to do what we've done in the US, because they're ultimately going to be asked the question, well, why do I pick you versus the other couple hundred Canadian brands, and then on top of that versus the 9,000 American brands. Essentially a big fish in a small pond. There wasn't a lot of noise and a lot of competition in our area. And then I think there was a noticeable trend with higher sales in our category, and buyers and distributors were looking for leadership there. And we could prove leadership because of those case studies we'd built in the US with a few key retailers. And the Canadian numbers helped because we were able to show how we were competing against the likes of Budweiser and Heineken, which obviously are well-known brands globally, and our strong results against those competitors, plus our US results, albeit in some very limited retailers, but those US examples were critical in terms of getting those conversations. So I think it was easier for us than craft brewers because there was just a lot less noise and competition in our category, so buyers could focus on what we had to offer.
Perfect. Thank you, Ted. So I guess Matt, as being in the in the Shark Tank with lots more competition, how do you feel about this? I know that you are earlier in your stages and you've dabbled a little bit, but what are your feelings?
It is like in the like kind of to echo what Ted is saying. There is a lot of competition out there, and especially in the United States. Us, in these parts of the world, we like drinking a lot, and especially beer. So finding a distributor is kind of where we're at right now, and even convincing a distributor that we have a solid value proposition and that we can stack up against a lot of portfolios out there. It's an interesting experience. I wouldn't say it's a bad experience. There's just a lot of learnings that are coming out of it. But in terms of a kind of like the good versus the bad, one of the big learnings that we are going through right now is time. This is taking a long time, and it's not simple just to kind of find a distributor and convince them that this is a product that they should carry. It takes time to foster a relationship, negotiate pricing, even talk about the demographics and your target kind of areas in the United States, especially because it's so vast and there's so many different regulations, and it varies from state versus county versus whatever. And so it is time, and time is definitely, as we all know, a very valuable resource. So one of the things that I kind of knew in the back of my head, but didn't realize how exactly much time this would take. And it sounds cliche, but everything is double the time and triple the cost. And those, if I was going to put anything in that kind of bad column, it would be time and money, because exporting doesn't come without a cost, and there is a cost, and there's some hidden costs that you may not have planned for, that you kind of find out as you go down the road. But planning really helps to mitigate those costs, and as I mentioned, fostering relationships and asking those important questions really go a long way.
For sure. And, and kind of what we talk about in TAP is a big thing, is about working on your export plan and creating something that you can try your best to use as a framework for you. But I'm sure Ted can probably tell you from when he made his export plan, it probably shifted. It probably shifted, or I guess Ted, you can tell me, was it 100% different? We always tell companies to maybe quarterly check in on your plans to see how far you are on that track. And although sometimes things pop up and you're like, nope, this is a great opportunity. No, it wasn't written in my plan, but I'm going to take it. So Ted, maybe just a comment on that.
Sure. So yeah, when we did it, we had just started to work with a single retailer. And the nice thing about our product is we were able to get around 3-tier distribution in the US, which is a regulated structure where, in most cases you have to fragment by state. We were able to work with a national retailer from the get-go, and that was part of our plan, and we were able to execute on that. But where the plan changed was, in order to scale, we actually did have to go back to beer distributors and do things in a much more fragmented way, which in some ways is good because you can focus on specific markets, but there's also additional cost to that. I think what changed our plan more so was we really added some US based expertise around beer distribution, manufacturing, retail, and really worked through what the different options were, and trying to optimize how we get into the US market, where our target customers are, who are our target retailers. And COVID did have an impact on that, because we were planning to go direct to retailers early on, and those retailers were kind of open to that. And then when COVID hit, they said, okay, we're not going to reinvent how product ends up on our shelves. You bring it on the same trucks that we're used to. There's no room for innovation on the supply chain side during COVID. So that kind of pushed us towards the existing distribution system, which we would have gone to in the longer term anyways, but it flipped that conversation quite quickly, and it changed our plan significantly.
That makes sense. Yeah, I think that best laid plans, right, for 2020. I think we've all had to use that. Well, I'll use the buzzword pivot in different ways in our businesses during COVID. And thank you for that feedback, both of you. And I'd say now moving into kind of the ugly here, and I think one of the biggest parts is the lockdown. How did that beginning, that lockdown, affect your business? It can be, yes, in regards to exporting, but also just your business in general, right? You have two kind of different types of models for your business, and it'd be interesting to hear, and maybe how you were able to mitigate some of that risk too. So I guess we'll start with Matt on this one.
Yeah, we had high hopes for 2020, and to start kind of our export plan, and get involved with TAP and everything, and had all these plans, had a great looking budget. We were on track on the beginning week of March. We were all having a good time, patting ourselves on the back for the success at the beginning of the year, and then everything happened. So we kind of crumpled up the budget and threw it out the window. Unfortunately had to lay off a large portion of our staff. We kept 3 key folks on, and the 4 owners as well. So obviously we lost our restaurant business and our on-premise. So the bars and restaurants were also down to nothing. So, but we did see the retail pick up, and throughout the lockdown, I was just sweating and crossing my fingers that the province will keep the liquor stores as an essential service, and they did, which helped. I don't know, it would be a very different story if that wasn't the case. And our production went through the roof, just as long as we could get the product in the cans and out the door into the retailer. So it did serve as a time that the 4 of us really looked at our business under a microscope, harder than we ever have, because the 4 of us are involved in very different areas of the business, and really kind of come together and evaluate for one, and plan for another point, and a little bit harder than we're used to. It wasn't just a strategy meeting; it was like a long, hard look at what we were doing. So we opened up a online store, and the 4 of us took turns just delivering beer to people who were ordering online. So I know a lot of people were at home in lockdown and working from home, and discovered Zoom and pivoted that way. But we were pounding the pavement, getting beer out to people who were delivering online, and making sure that production was still under control, and that we're not out of stock on anything. And it was again a learning. We're obviously haven't gone through anything like that before, and but we, on the other side of the lockdown, we know now what it takes to kind of run a little leaner. There were some inefficiencies that we are not going back to, and positions where we won't be in again, because we had that internal look at what it takes to run our business from four of us from each unique perspective. So on the other side of the lockdown, we kind of keeping true to that production plan, and can kind of dip our toes in that export plan again. And hopefully now we're saying it's 2020 is that kind of write-off that everybody says, and 2021 will be our year.
Yeah, it's interesting though. I'm finding that companies are still like this. The fact that we've gone through something so pivotal and life-changing like this, and as small businesses and companies, that you guys are entrepreneurs are still so resilient. I'm finding anyways for you guys, is that you guys took it with a grain of salt. You have, I'm going to use the buzzword again, pivoted your business very quickly. And then you figured out what wasn't working and shifted it. And I think that as a consumer, not a business owner, during lockdown, I think we were all more than happy to contribute to the sales of local and breweries and beer and these stores too. I think that was a really, for us during lockdown, I think that was quite the big push. And also when you're thinking, hey, we're in lockdown, we maybe don't want to drink as much as we are, let's maybe go to the non-alcoholic option and feel a little bit better about that balance in our life during lockdown too. Because I know that honestly is something that was affected everyone during lockdown. You brought up a really interesting part about supply chain here that I would just like to ask, and I'll ask Ted the same question. Cans. How was your cans during this? I know that there was some, did you have any roadblocks with your shipments or your supply chain, Matt?
No, not at all. We heard the rumblings about it, definitely, and we were talking to our suppliers and everything, but they're confident that we wouldn't have any issue. A lot of it was kind of in the details. Like if you take a can like aluminum with like the branding like Coke and Pepsi use, like the printed cans, those would be harder to come by due to the contracts of the big folks that have them. But we don't, right? We use sleeves for our labels, so all that we asked for from our supplier is blank aluminum cans, and that wasn't really a problem, and it doesn't seem to be a problem right now. That could change.
No,
but,
like knocking on wood for you.
yeah, definitely. But that's kind of how the can situation, we were kind of comfortable with the aluminum.
Perfect. Thanks, Matt. And I guess now, Ted, moving on to you, same question about lockdown and your business and then cans.
Sure. Yeah, like the ugly for us during COVID, in hindsight now, in the grand scheme of things, not that ugly. We didn't have to lay off anybody. We were able to kind of, we had enough financial stability that we could, some of our trade and marketing sales, field sales people, we kind of put them on some other activities. Their hours came down, but they still got hours. We tried to, send them to some training courses, and we instituted weekly, Zoom calls to kind of, and, we'd pay them to come on and just, we just chit chat for an hour. Right. So, I think the biggest challenge was, was on the people side for our business. And it wasn't so much that we had to make some of those tough decisions. It was really a matter of trying to support each other in in a business model like ours, where we have a decentralized, workforce. So we have people in Toronto, in Ottawa, in Calgary, in Chicago, in Austin, Texas. It's not, and I'm a single founder. So those things, and when Matt talks about doing some things with his co-founders, I'm kind of envious of that, because it's, I to have that support network through something like this, I think is incredibly important. And related to that, I was going through, like, we started our financing in January, February, trying to raise money for our business, and we were successful in doing it, but it was another thing that just dragged on and on, and I was having some personal health issues during that time, and the COVID, and the kids at home, and it was just kind of like this perfect storm of difficulties at that time for me on a personal level. The good news, like I say, in hindsight, good problems, because we did get the financing done. We didn't have to lay anyone off. Everyone seems to have kind of come out of the dark days of COVID relatively well, from a team perspective. So that's kind of where it looked ugly for us. But when you take a step back, it was just kind of, it was really. And then, to switch over to the can perspective, we are manufacturing cans similar to Coke and Pepsi. So we are competing with them for capacity. We, particularly with the financing behind us, we were able to pre-purchase cans, and we're holding, significant amounts of inventory, and that's how we're protecting ourselves to kind of keep,
great.
4 months ahead of where we see demand, so that we have that buffer to work with.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's a very smart idea. And kind of going back to what we were talking about before we were recording on this call, is that I think that, as you mentioned, Ted, like, the people of it all, right? The humans. We're all humans. We're all people first, and this lockdown took a toll on everyone, right? It affected absolutely everybody, and there's something. It's so unfortunate, but there's also something kind of comforting that we've all been going through this thing together and trying to muddle our way through it in these different circumstances. And I feel like as a city, as a province, as a country, as a world, like, this is something that we are all dealing with, right? And I think that that's where I think, on a business perspective, things have shifted too, is that before, maybe when Calgary, like, for instance, had the flood, or with Alberta with our recession, we maybe felt a little bit isolated and alone in that. Like, we were kind of going through a really tough time, and no one knew how tough of a time we were going through. But with COVID, I find that we're all kind of on the same page, and a little bit more compassionate, and working together, and finding different collaboratory or areas to collaborate, and with other local, national companies. And I think that that's kind of been a positive that's come out of this, is that we've seen people on a more personal level in our business environment.
Agreed, definitely.
Yeah, and I think it's important, and I think that's maybe something that I hope after all of this doesn't go back to the button up. We're not going to ask people how they're doing. Like you mentioned before, oh my goodness, if there was a kid in the background of a Zoom call. I think it's great that we have kind of loosened up a little bit in that realm of doing business, and being people with families and lives right outside of our businesses.
Yeah, I think our experience with working with other businesses and other entrepreneurs during that time locally was fantastic. We partnered with a bunch of other sort of small startup local food producers, created some online stores where we could try to promote our local products. So there was a lot of hustle that was still, despite all the headwinds, people were hustling to kind of figure out, how do we get through this, how do we work together, how do we make local products more accessible and more visible to our local community. So I think a lot of good came out of that, and the companies that do survive, I think, will be stronger for it, and those that fold, I hope those entrepreneurs come back at a later time with all the experience that this will bring for them, and Can it get much worse? Probably not.
Not
I hope so. I hope not. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like, yeah, it'd be coming back with their battle scars, right? And saying, okay, well, this happened during COVID. We weren't able to kind of to survive this or push through, but like, this is what we've learned, and this is how we're going to go forward in a different way. I'm so lucky to work with many entrepreneurs, and during this, during COVID, it was actually, it was so inspiring, and honestly, I'm inspiring to see how you guys are just so resilient and just moving along. And especially in Calgary and Alberta, I'm finding, because like I said, flood, recession, like pandemic, it's like, what's next? You're just going to keep on, you guys are just keep on trucking on, and I'm working so hard to be successful, and also while being just positive brand ambassadors for the city, for the country, right, for the province. I just find that we do have I know every province and the world right now is on this buy local, I don't want to say kick, but they're really pushing it. But I think that we live it. Like, and I think we do it in a very positive way. I don't think it's buy local and forget everybody else. I think we're aware that certain things you will still buy from, let's just say, a regular store or something, right? But I think that people have been going the extra mile to support different local companies. And maybe when it comes to gifts, or even from a corporate level, us at CED right now, anything that we are contributing to different events or things along those lines, it's all local, because why not right now? There's no excuse not to at this moment, I find. So I think that's been another kind of shift at this moment. So I guess we can move on now to advice time. So what's kind of one piece of advice you have for companies that are looking to go global in these ever-changing times? And we can start with Ted for that one.
Yeah, I have a saying, I say focus, use the 2 F's, which are focus and flexibility when you're going international. You want to be focused, and I think our experience might be informative to people watching, that pick off a few small retailers or distributors or partners that you think you can really make a success story from, and then leverage that success story onto that next larger partner, and so on. So it's a step function that you just be willing to start small and build out and test and learn and do it again, and then be flexible, because the best laid plans, they're only as good until you kind of I think one of the sayings is, until the plans are great until you engage with the enemy. Well, as soon as you end up in the market, you need to be able to figure out, okay, what's working and what's not, change, maybe change your partners, maybe change your distributors, change your marketing. So I think that, for me, the 2 F's, focus and flexibility, are key things to keep in mind.
Perfect. Thank you, Ted. I think that's great pieces of advice. Matt?
Yeah, really well said, Ted. That was great. I'm taking a lot out of that too. So that's really great advice. Thank you. I think just with our experience, we've recognized the what it takes to plan. And as cliche as it is, as it kind of sounds, I mean, my number one piece of advice would be to plan and more plan. The more you plan, the more confident you are in how you execute, and I think that confidence goes a long way when you're trying to sell in a market that you're not familiar with. So from the minute details to kind of the 50,000 foot view, just make sure it's all planned out.
Perfect. I think that's a great piece of advice too. So I think that's and it's a nice holistic view here. So it's plan so you feel more confident, and then execute and realize that some of these plans might not go 100% your way with that, and be able to react quickly to it.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of works really well together. And I also, just once again, I know I've said it in the beginning, but it's so great to see just kind of the two sides of this, right? From a company that has been, I've known for a few years now, taking our first cohort now to Matt, you guys at Dandy being literally just graduated yesterday from the cohort. So it's really cool to see the journeys that people are on, right? As with their businesses. So
Dandy has a reputation as like shooting from the hip, you know, kind of do things kind of off the wall, just off the spur of the moment. But don't do that with export. We're learning it right now. Just the more you plan, the better you feel about what you're doing.
Perfect. Yeah, I would say so too. And I think that it's sometimes you just don't realize until you write it down what you've
absolutely
right, what you're looking for, and then second of all, what you need. And I think that's a big thing too, is that people don't realize kind of maybe those blind spots. And I think that just having a plan helps with those blind spots. And then when you do, like you said, Ted, when you do go into market and you're engaging with the enemy and everything that's kind of going on in there, then at least you've got kind of a wider view or a bigger scope then into, okay, well, if I needed this before and I did all this base work, okay, well, what's next? What do I need to change here, right? And I think it's better than just going in with kind of a super loosey-goosey and then things going completely different and then you having no base and no framework to go off of. So I think it's very important. And I guess
I would add just in the planning process that, that's where you can leverage, those resources like EDC, like the Trade Commissioner Service. You can leverage other entrepreneurs like Matt and I who've, had some experience doing this before and, can save you from, some of the landmines we've stepped on. And you inevitably do step on things that, that set you back. But, there's a lot of great resources out there, and that planning process, I think, helps you to tap into some of those. There's another plug. There's a plug for tap. No,
I was gonna say, I love a good pun. I love a good pun. No, 100%. Something, and I sometimes I think that I try not to sound like I'm repeating myself with some of these items, but that ecosystem I think is so important, and that's why we want to do things like this, where it's just casual conversation about what have you guys done, what's been bad, what's been good, like where are you at. And I think that when you're reaching out to people that have never done this before and they think of it as this really far off thing that's not feasible for them, or they're like, oh, I'm a local lifestyle brand, that's my space to play, right? But you can be so much, and something that's amazing and it's awesome if in your scope, but you can add on to that and you can leverage that to be a global lifestyle brand. Like why wouldn't you want to be a global lifestyle brand is my thought process, right? So it's definitely utilizing that ecosystem, because 10 cohorts in, we have over 150 grads now. And for me, I'm like, that's 150 SMEs that all have the same mindset, that are all going after the same thing. Yes, different sectors, different industries, different regions or markets of entries, but they all have that same mindset. And they've all messed up, they've all had successes, and they've had a couple blow-ups, right? So it's leveraging that and how it can support these new SMEs as they're going forward too. So thank you for that advice. I guess my last kind of question today would be, looking forward. So where do you see your company going? What are your global aspirations, right? It's that, where do you see yourself next year, 5 years from now, your company? So I guess we will start with Ted for that one.
Yeah, I started this company because, I had a personal health issue, gave up alcohol, still really wanted to be part of the craft beer community, not only from a taste point of view, but just, the experience that craft beer brings to people from a ability, it just makes it easy for people to socialize and experience, the culinary industry more easily. My vision for us for the future, and we're starting to see this, is that I would love to go to a small town in Canada or in the US, go to the local bar, and they have a craft non-alcoholic beer on the menu, hopefully Partake, and I can order it and they don't look at me like I'm, crazy. I'm accepted. And, we're early days still in that process, but that's sort of my envision, would be that we change the way people view non-alcoholic beer and the way people view those who consume it. And it's just an acceptable choice, and it's easily acceptable, and it's of a quality and variety that's on par with craft. So that's my ultimate vision. Where am I going to be in a few years? Well, we're taking some steps towards that next year with some US distribution and some key retailers that we'll probably be announcing fairly soon in the next few months.
So we're going to patiently await that text. I do think too, is that I think you really do hit the nail on the head there, that sometimes non-alcoholic craft beer is perceived as less than from a quality perspective, right? Not just from the fact that it doesn't have alcohol, but just from that quality. Because sometimes you think that the larger brands, the non-craft beer makers, they make a non-alcoholic beer to just kind of say, hey, we have one. Right. So it's nice when you can have one that has, the same care that's put into it, like that all our local craft breweries have. Right. So I think that's where I think we all look about finding those gaps in the markets. And I think you definitely found one. And I would say that I think it's very tasty. And it is nice to be able to have a different option, right? I'd say that I don't think anyone, and as we're talking to the community here that are all in the brewery community, no one just drinks beer because it has alcohol in them. Like, right? We drink it because it's tasty. We drink it because that time and that effort and those recipes and the hard work that goes into them. And craft beer just tastes better. Right. So for me, it's taking away that one side of it and just looking at the craftsmanship.
There's certainly that, but the biggest challenge I found when I did give up alcohol was I really felt isolated. It was kind of like wasn't COVID, but it's, you feel like you're not able to socialize as well. Having a glass of water when all your buddies are having the latest craft beer, it just makes you feel like you're not part of the group. And I think that's reflected in the name of our brand. If that's our reason for being is to bring those people like me who felt kind of isolated from craft beer back to the tent.
That's fantastic, and I think that's a great thought process and kind of mantra, if you will, for people that are looking to still be a part of it. Yeah, trying to tell someone, drinking your glass of water while everyone's enjoying a nice frosty beverage is definitely not the same. So no, I hear you there. Matt, how about you guys? So I guess same question. Looking forward, where do you see yourself and your company?
We're, as mentioned, just early in the whole export process, but I do want to take the plan from day one, 6 years ago, has been to grow the brand and grow outside of Alberta. We are going to focus on Canada, kind of and make sure that we are it's not just like kind of those one-off buys that we're talking with distributors. It's kind of a solid plan for a calendar year. And I think we want to gain a little bit more experience and confidence that way, kind of before we head out into the United States or whatever market that we want to get into. But doing the TAP program kind of made us realize that we're not in a rush to do this either. This doesn't have to happen like tomorrow, but we are making the contacts now. We're getting we're getting on the starting block. We're having conversations that we wouldn't have had otherwise, and we're learning a ton. And when we're ready, we're gonna make the leap and dive in, because it is essentially what we want to do. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. In 5 years we want to be across the province or across the nation for sure, and have some experience internationally.
Well, and it's interesting too, and I know even Matt, you and I yesterday were talking about this. It's not like an and, or it's not an or conversation, right? Like you can still be
definitely
working on the connection building, the relationship building, the fact finding, the finding where you fit best in the market while growing nationally too. I think sometimes people think, okay, well, if I'm looking global now, that's it. I'm never growing anymore nationally.
Yeah.
I'm staying where I am, but it's nice to see that you can work on these projects, and I think that's where the plan comes into play, right? Where you can say, okay, maybe in the next 6 months we're going to put 80% resources national, 20 exporting. Maybe
exactly.
next year it's 35, right? So it's how you're growing and how you're seeing this plan develop, and that is a part of it. I think people sometimes think that you just kind of snap your fingers and then all of a sudden you're in a new market, and then that's it, right? So, but the
plan is a living, breathing document. It's changing, it's evolving, and it can't stay stagnant, because your company doesn't stay stagnant, right?
Exactly, right? I'd say it's like your business plan. It's like everything. It's if it looks, if anyone out there has a business plan that looks the exact same as when they started their business, I want to see it.
Yeah, yeah,
Because
yeah.
that would be amazing and very interesting to me.
Yeah. I would add to Matt's advice. You know, I pitched at a beer competition in the U.S. in late 2017. One of the panelists on that, like the judging panel for that pitch competition, was the buyer that we ended up having our relationship with in early 2019, which laid the foundation for us to now talk to distributors and other retailers. So, and then, you know, similar experience on the financing side. Maybe this was more COVID, but I think it reinforces the point that, you know, no one invested in us. They didn't have a relationship at least 9 months prior to COVID. We had lots of conversations with people for the first time during COVID, but all the people that, you know, crossed the finish line with us on the financing, they were all people we knew at least 9 months prior.
So it's relationship building is so important. So I think that and I'd say my piece of kind of advice is don't take that for granted, but also don't totally write it off because of COVID. There are different ways that you can build relationships, different ways that you can start building your ecosystem internationally too. So I would say don't press pause, don't press stop on that relationship building and that going forward, because you can still make a lot of progress in this new way of doing business is
Most definitely.
Perfect. And guys, that's everything that I have for you today. I just want to say thank you so much. Partake, Dandy, you guys are both amazing, and Matt and Ted, you guys are amazing entrepreneurs and small business owners. And it's just great to hear where you're going. And thank you for giving the candid, authentic feedback and advice to companies, because I think that it's important for us to not, I think sometimes there's this thought process that everyone has to hold everything really close to their chest and everything's a trade secret, right? Or something very, very, they're like, oh, well, I don't want to share. Maybe people are going to look at me differently if they hear about an occasion where it went wrong or some struggles we've had. But I think that people really take a lot from it. So just thank you for being here today.
Thanks so much, Shona. Yeah, we really appreciate it. And Ted, great to share the panel with you. Had fun. Thanks very much, Shona.
Yeah, thanks Matt as well. Thanks, Shona. Great to be here.
Bye, everybody.
Cheers.
Bye.